We have a company called Goodair Nosebuds. We now have a little device that you can plug into your nose that vibrates to ease nasal congestion symptoms. Nasal breathing is just a very, very fundamental advantage for every single person. There are no really decent alternatives for nasal congestion other than pharmaceutical solutions that actually don't work very well. We're pretty keen on solving a lot just by focusing on the value of breathing properly, for people to just learn how to breathe properly. If we can get that message out to the world, we will have done our job.
Hello and welcome to another episode of Ways to Wealth. Today I'm joined by Kerri. Kerri, why don't you give us the TLDR on who you are and what you're working on and what you do?
So I'm Kerri McMaster, and we have a company called Goodair Nosebuds, which in origin came from Auckland University of Technology. Dr. David White was working on upper respiratory innovations, and we now have a little device that you can plug into your nose that vibrates to ease nasal congestion symptoms. So somewhat deeper than that, our reason for being on the planet is twofold. One is that nasal breathing is just a very, very fundamental health advantage for every single person. And number two, there are no really decent alternatives for nasal congestion other than pharmaceutical solutions that actually don't work very well, or nasal irrigation. And for people who've ever done that, it's just gross and horrible and it's not very pleasant. So, we're pretty keen on solving a lot just by focusing on the value of breathing properly, for people to just learn how to breathe properly. If we can get that message out to the world, we will have done our job.
Okay, yeah, cool. But that wasn't obviously where you started. There's a whole backstory to how you'd even get about messing with nosebuds. Does it create, is it close to irrigation afterwards when you put them in? Does it let it all?
No, it's almost the opposite, really. So what happens is that they vibrate in your nose, and that vibration helps to get the cilia in your nose moving nicely, or in your nasal tract. Cilia are little hair-like features. They're not actual hairs, but they're little hair-like features. And when you've got a blocked nose, they're rigid, so they're not moving. What they're supposed to do is move nicely to help pathogens and mucus move through to the back of your throat and down into your stomach. So when they're moving nicely, the mucociliary transport is working the way it should. When they're not working nicely, it gets stuck. And so in addition to that, the particular vibration that we use to get them to create the opening of the cilia also creates an increased production of nitric oxide, which is a vasodilator and has all kinds of amazingly positive effects on every organ in the body. So for perspective, young people produce an enormous amount of nitric oxide, which is why they look beautiful, have gorgeous skin, and just vibrant beings. Yeah. And as we age, we produce less of it. That's in part why we become less vibrant looking human beings and have crinkled skin and, all the rest. Could be claimed as a youth elixir. If you could produce it in enough quantity consistently across your life, it probably would.
How long do you have to put them in for, before exercising, or?
So just 10 minutes twice a day is what we generally recommend. That's our general recommendation, just to maintain good breathing quality in your nose. So for people who struggle with chronic nasal congestion and nasal issues like, allergic rhinitis, allergies, sinus conditions, and so on, if they were to use the device 10 minutes twice a day, that would be enough to feel the effects and have an improvement in patency in their nose. But you can't overuse them.
That was my next question.
Yeah. So you can't overuse them. You literally could just leave them in all day if you wanted, and you'd feel amazing. The other thing is that they actually make you you get better brain clarity. There's all kinds of other things. More
oxygen. Yeah. Amazing what oxygen can do for you.
So there's that, but there's also the nitric oxide effect. There's a lot going on, and the nose actually is really integral for maintaining your nervous system. So we are working on another device that will help people to de-stress and sleep better. So for anyone who does any amount of meditation or is familiar with meditative practices, so pranayama breathing, where you block one side of your nose and then the other side and breathing in and out, what that is doing is activating the parasympathetic system. So sympathetic is fight or flight. Parasympathetic is where you're chilled and relaxed. And so by manipulating how left and right nose dominant breathing, you can activate the parasympathetic mode to take you to calm from fight or flight. So people who do practice meditation will be really familiar with what happens when you're breathing properly, and getting into that calm state. So the next device that we're working on is literally designed to try and stimulate that the parasympathetic system to help people with sleep and to help ease and calm anxiety.
That's great, because those are two, like breathing correctly, obviously, and that's kind of like that leads up to the next part.
Yeah.
But those are they're quite nice use cases of something that's in essence quite simple.
Yeah. So I think that's the thing, is that there's especially right now, we just seem to have a lot more anxiety. People are just generally more anxious, and there's been lots of conversation about how the impact of mobile devices and so on, just having younger people having access to social media too early, all of those things. There's lots and lots of discussion about why we're seeing such an epidemic of anxiety and mental health conditions. And yet, what is not really being talked about a lot is just the simple practice of nasal breathing being an immediate and simple natural body solution to helping people go back into a calm state. So, it is literally as simple as breathing through your nose, but sometimes people need a little bit of help. And so that's why I say our bigger purpose is really just about helping people understand this amazing thing that is just on our face that we're underusing, that could be just solving a lot of other problems.
Yeah, that's cool. So that it was kind of like, we've spoken about this a little bit before, and it seemed like this was a little bit of not a mistake. It wasn't a mistake. It was like kind of just came out of nowhere. It kind of potentially almost was like an underutilized piece of research and piece of tech. Yeah. And you kind of just had someone ask you, do you want to have a look at it?
Yeah, well, exactly. I mean, that's exactly what happened. I'd just finished up with my previous startup, which is in the sports sector, and somebody that I'd been working with over the years on and off from AUT said to me, "Hey, do you want to come and have a look at this device?" Thinking it would have great sports applications, and in fact it does. But anyway, so he showed me these vibrating nasal things that was just a big block at the time with a giant battery. So, really early prototype. And when I first saw it, I thought, I really don't think so. I just couldn't see the application at all. But there were a few things going on at the lab where Dr. David White was. So I spent some time looking at a number of technologies in the lab and considered the commercialization pathways for them. So I did a piece of work for AUT at the time, looking at possible commercial pathways for a couple of technologies there. And the nosebuds just sort of kept coming back at me. Right. And the more time I spent with them, the more I understood where they had actually come from, what their origin was. They had come out of a CPAP machine. So for people who don't know what CPAP is, for people who struggle to sleep through the night, where they actually stop breathing in the night, CPAP machine provides pressurized air to the either mouth or nose. So you wear a mask and sleep with this pumping air so that you get oxygen and air all night. So the nosebuds were a derivative of that. And the background of that is there was, already sort of 20 years of research behind that. So, once I understood their origin, and I myself, I meditate every day, so I really appreciated the breathing aspect of it, and the fact that it was focused on restoring nasal breathing. I became quite enamored with it, and so I got very focused, and we spun it out, did a cap raise, and the rest is history. We're in market now.
I remember
August 28.
I remember when you were just talking about it when we met at Morgo, because you actually shared kind of where you were at, and I was like, those things.
Yeah.
And I didn't really think about it, but then also I started thinking about it a lot after the conference, because I kept seeing also these other nasal things that were going over athletes' noses to try and obviously make it big. I don't know what that's doing. It's almost like a magnetic, very basic application. And I've always struggled with sinus issues. So it's something that I always, and my grandmother has terrible sinuses, and I know that there's terrible sinus like issues that me and my grandmother especially have. I get a lot of like hay fever and stuff. So I thought about that a lot. I have thought about it a lot, and then it was great to then catch up again and then hear about all the success you've had since then, when you were kind of like, it was like you knew a lot about it, but no one did.
Yeah, exactly.
And you were talking about it, and you're like, I think this is going to be pretty good. And then I guess turns out it's pretty good. Yeah. Worked out pretty good.
Yeah. So, I mean, a lot of the work that I did while I was at AUT was just validating the market, and really aggressive, just went real hard. I think, having been in multiple previous startups that, some I've grown organically and some have been funded, it really doesn't take long to realize that, product market fit is everything. And so aggressively hunting that down and aggressively understanding, is there actually a proper pain point? Is it a pain point that's big enough for people to want to part with money, whether that be a business or whether it's a consumer? Really validating that and really understanding who that customer is and why it is a pain point and what the alternatives are. All of that. We were super, super aggressive with just peeling back the onion and really understanding what was needed, and so yes, I really understood it deeply. So then it was my task to help other people understand. So our design team, for example, the same, a lot of skepticism, because it's a whole new concept. We've never asked people to put things up their noses before, you know. And certainly a device that looks like earbuds, and it's vibrating. It's quite a bizarre concept. So helping people understand that we really, really understood this market, and that there really was a true and clear opportunity. So 1 in 4 people, I was just listening to you, everyone I speak to says either themselves or their partner or their mother or their child or whatever have got nasal conditions. 1 in 4 people struggle with chronic nasal congestion or nasal conditions. So that, you know, is sinus conditions and blocked nose, whatever. So 1 in 4 people worldwide, and less than 15% of all of those people are actually satisfied with the solutions they're currently using. That's a massive thing.
It is so annoying. It's such an annoying issue to deal with, because it's so meh. It's so kind of almost pathetic, but also super inconvenient.
Totally.
And you'd be surprised how tired you get from it, because you end up just losing a lot of like fluids.
Correct. But I think it's more than that, actually. So this is something that is probably one of the most common threads in who's struggling and what do they struggle with. Fatigue is actually one of the biggest things for people with nasal congestion issues. Just exhausted all the time.
It's tough.
It
is, because either you're on the meds that make you exhausted, or you're having an immune response, basically, in the case of hay fever or something.
And you can't breathe properly.
So you're not getting the oxygen you need. And headaches
that go with it, the whole shebang. It's just it really is a really, really terrible problem.
Yeah, for sure.
And have something that is non-pharmaceutical, effective, and actually quite relaxing at the same time is the feedback we're getting from customers is just, I mean, it actually really almost makes me emotional, because we are doing it. We are actually doing what we set out to do. We are actually helping people with this horrible, horrible problem. So, it's cool.
Yeah, that's awesome. So prior to you've kind of come into this, I feel like this is your phase where you kind of, there's a lot of underlying confidence. Like, you know, have you ever read the book The War of Art?
No.
Oh, you should. It's like a 2-hour read. But it's all about the war of art. So most art is never completed kind of vibe. And when you're, there's forces stopping you from doing your work. And then most people don't write the book they were going to read, compose the songs or whatever it is, build a business, etc. It's just a really good book.
Cool.
But as you go through different phases of your career, you end up being kind of different parts, and eventually you emerge as kind of what they refer to in the book as a pro. And there's a book about that that's on from the War of Art. But you know, there's a lot of confidence that's been built up from the prior projects that you've worked on. So like, at what point did you kind of start getting into kind of tech and entrepreneurship and stuff? Like when was that a thing?
Well, actually right from the beginning, really. So I've actually only ever had a couple of paid gigs where I've turned up to work and got a paycheck. And I think that really just came down to two things: a serious drive for freedom and a serious drive for, just impatience. I just don't think I had the patience to be a cog in the wheel and just, working away, chipping away. I really wanted to do big things as quickly as I could. And take the fastest route to get there. So I've learned a lot along the way that the fastest route isn't always the best route.
Yeah.
But
not straight through always.
Exactly.
You can go over or under.
Yeah, exactly. And sometimes just banging against the wall that's in the way isn't either. That is not necessarily the best way either, that you can sometimes go around or over. So learned a lot along the way. But basically that was the driver, just wanted to go as fast as I could.
So what was the first equity gig you got? What was the first thing you did where you were you had skin in the game?
So the first thing I did was actually I just was running a little now that I look back, at the time I called it almost a marketing consultancy. It really wasn't. It was just a commercialization consultancy. So doing work, doing actual work for other organizations where basically taking whatever their product was and commercializing it. Yeah.
So would you say that's been your real forte?
Yeah, look, it's actually what I really, really love. I realized, I just have, in fact, this particular business is really the business that I've finally kind of gone, oh my God, this is just what I love. I just love doing this, taking ideas and turning them into something. So the first equity gig was taking other people's something. Yeah.
And basically helping them make money from it.
Yeah.
Commercialize it.
Yeah, exactly.
And that was mainly helping hardware.
No, actually one of the quite varied. And in fact, one of them was, as I mentioned to you, we had 42 karate schools Yeah. So that I am an ex-karateka. So
that's right.
So that,
So that was a business for you as well.
Yeah, absolutely.
Oh wow. So you were, because you were world champion 3 times.
Twice. Yeah.
Twice. And then you had 42 schools.
Yeah.
Was that like a franchise?
And that was before I won my world championships.
Right.
I was running the schools.
How old were you when you first won the world championships?
27, maybe 26. Yeah.
Okay, so you had the schools before then.
Yeah.
Crazy. That's young.
Yeah, so seriously.
How 42 schools, like, how does that work? You ran and operated all of them, or was it like a franchise?
Well, I mean, you know how how the whole Budo system works. So you have the Udansha, which is, black belts.
Yep.
So all the senior grades. So senior grades would run their schools, but we would pay
senior grades.
Yeah. Yeah. So
okay.
Yeah. And they would run the schools. Yeah.
Oh, cool.
Yeah.
Oh, wicked. That's interesting. And then from there, you started getting into commercialization after that, or was that before?
No, I also worked as a, so I did that. I had this whole other life going on. That was just something I did part-time.
Yeah.
So I worked in property, actually, in the commercial property sector.
Okay.
And again, just doing my own thing, but contracting to commercial property developers.
Right.
Yeah. So I was just sort of figuring out exactly where I lived and what I did best, but it was always basically finding those commercial pathways. So taking something, I mean, one of the property projects that I worked on, it was stagnant. It was just sitting there half
occupied?
No, half built.
Right.
So how do we finish it, and then what's the market? Where do we and finishing it was understanding what is that market and how do we get it to the marketed to the right people so that it actually becomes occupied.
Yeah, that's exciting and different. So there's a lot of different things you were doing, but then you kind of not niche down, but you've been in sports tech for a long time now, and I would consider this current project almost sports tech now too. Just because it could be utilised by athletes. Yeah, absolutely. It's not directly, but I know that a lot of athletes care about how much oxygen they get.
Absolutely. Yeah, so it's been in sport tech for 20-something years, and that was an amazing. That was an evolution as well. So started with a consulting business, but we collected so much data over 10 years, and actually we started that business with the view that we should be able to automate some of the high performance training systems. And so we were collecting data, and then we finally went, okay, it's time to turn that into tech. And the same thing, we did a trip really early on in the piece to all the sort of major players in the sports sector to just ascertain whether or not they believed what we were working on would have
and it's a huge industry now.
Massive.
Like, sports optimization is massive, right? Like performance optimization is just and nutrition and the nutritional science around, especially in combat sports, around cutting weight.
Yeah, that's right.
There's just a whole industry around the whole thing now. It's like absolutely bonkers. Yeah. It's kind of interesting to see how far it's developed and how deep the optimization goes into the casual competitors now, right?
If
I look at jiu-jitsu competitors that are in the gym and essentially are hobbyists, even if they train like they're pros, but they are, if they were to compete 15, 20 years ago, they would have been massively ahead of the game from a nutritional and a kind of fundamental athlete perspective.
100%. So I'm quite proud of the consulting business that we had with Performance Lab, and that we were absolutely cutting the way there. Absolutely defining that everyday people could work at an optimal level for their activity, for their casual weekend warrior kind of activities, that they could get that optimization just as we were providing for our elite Olympic athletes. So we're pretty proud of that. And actually we had a health management business as well. So because all the same rules apply. So all the same rules to optimizing your health are the same rules that we apply when we're optimizing athletic performance. And so the same, just running running a systematic system for everyday people to just be able to improve and optimize their everyday life to keep themselves healthy. We were absolutely well ahead of the game. So.
And you exited out of that business in 2020?
So I did. We actually merged with a US company, and so I finished with that business in 2020. It's still running. It's still going.
It's still going. Cool. How was that experience? It's an interesting one. There's a lot of mixed feelings and exits and how they go about. Was it opportunistic? Was it just the right time? It'd been a marathon at that point, right?
Yeah, totally. So, and particularly because the tech business had been spun out of the consulting business as well. So, it really was a marathon. And it was tough. It was so tough. The whole shebang, as we grew, it got tougher and tougher and tougher. So for me, it was the right time for me to move on. I think we had kind of had this conversation previous, just that that thing in me where I needed the agility. I needed to
become too big and too corporatized.
Yeah, I mean, I just felt like, what do I do here? You know, I can't, I just not, so I was pretty hungry, which is why I say this particular startup has been quite a revelation for me. I never really consciously thought about who I am and why do I do these things. I just did, you know. But this was quite a revelation because the moment I started working on this new project, was the moment I realized that I was back home. I was back in that scenario of just taking something from nothing and turning it into something. And as you say, with all that prior knowledge, just having a different level of confidence and knowing what I needed to hunt down.
It was probably necessary to have gone through that experience and all of those years in the industry when it was nascent to then obviously pick up a piece of technology that had basically, it was 80% of it had been done, but then the last 20% always takes longer anyway. But the kind of critical, what we call in our business when we talk about, talk to founders is, the cone of uncertainty. And the cone of uncertainty had been reduced when you got hold of it, but then obviously you've now taken it to market and further again reduced it into, and that's, and really as a founder going along the road or an operator, you're just trying to actually, if you're building something from scratch, you're trying to basically reduce that cone of uncertainty. And if you're actually establishing a business that already has a blueprint, again, you want to stay with high certainty.
I think it's a really interesting process. I'd never encountered this before. I'd commercialized lots of things, obviously, lots of businesses, but I'd never had any association with trying to do that with something that had been developed in a university. There is a lot, all the research is done. You've got a kind of proof of concept or a prototype. But what is ahead is all the actual things that really make it possible to become something that a consumer could use.
That's right.
So even the development process from the university, even just the design process and the development process was huge, complex and huge, because this has to be something that can be productized. It needs to go to a manufacturer and be manufactured. So all of what was there in concept was great, but how do you now turn this into something that can be scaled and manufactured? And so Chris Thompson, he's done all our design work and basically handheld us through the manufacturing process.
Right.
Thank goodness, because I had always said if I ever had another startup, I would never, ever do hardware. Here I am doing hardware. So that's been an amazing thing for me to learn. So that's something that I didn't have under my belt. I've never, ever manufactured anything. So that was a huge learning curve for me, and that's been kind of cool.
That's
really
fun.
Exciting.
Manufacturing is fun. That's interesting. And then I guess and you've got to do it. Hardware's often quite capital intensive, finding the manufacturing lines, and then obviously finding distribution. It's kind of like three kind of key steps. Very, very difficult. Easier, a lot harder than just editing a website or a bit of software.
Totally.
Which I enjoy. That low barrier. What was the most, what do you think the most challenging part, what has been?
Which is the most challenging thing? There's so many, right? They're just that startup. There are so many, but I do think actually probably our most challenging thing is we as I mentioned, we're working on a sleep and reducing anxiety device. The motor design for that has been phenomenally hard.
Right.
Phenomenally hard. And the other thing, I guess, is what, as you know, we launched and things just went mental and sold out very, very quickly. So we then had to revisit our predictions on production and scale production much faster.
Right.
So that has been actually very, very challenging as well.
Yeah.
Not so much the scaling of production, but making sure that our quality control can scale as fast. So that has definitely been quite challenging. Yeah. So, the hardware piece is definitely hard. There's a reason it's called hardware. No, it is hard. It's but we're super, super lucky. The other, well, maybe not lucky. The other thing that you learn, having done, startup multiple times, is that good people are everything. And so hunting down good people has been a mission. Just getting really, really great experienced people around this business has been paramount to its success. And so consequently, as I say, Chris Johnson has managed our design process and the manufacturing process for us. Total seasoned pro. So that has relieved so much of that pain for us and sped that process up.
Right.
Although having said that, we predicted we'd be in market a year earlier than we were.
Yeah.
So, the pain's still there.
Yeah, for sure. That's interesting. And I guess in terms of horizon gazing a little bit, like, what do you think you can think from 5 years from now? Like, what would that look like in your head? I mean, what would you have achieved? What do you think? Yeah, what do you think the
I think, given the nature of what we're doing, 5 years from now, success would be in the form of an exit. We're pretty ambitious. So from here to 5 years, we are all about velocity of sales. So we're going into Australia in February. We'll be going into the States at the end of the year. We've just gone into pharmacy. So speed to get this product
distributed,
is going to define our success, really. So as you can imagine, coming from the business that you come from, our big challenge is going to be how do we fund that? How do you fund the growth? And how do you do it intelligently, right? Because funding the growth doesn't actually mean putting dollars into something. It means actually how do you really get the distribution engine going? And what kind of terms do you have so that you are not the bank? I mean, we will be. To a sense, you might have to be for certain parts of it, but also how do you de-risk that and how do you kind of manage that cash flow? Absolutely. And ultimately, your strategy around that is going to dictate potential dilution, potential liabilities on the cap table, etc., etc., etc. So, and interestingly, in this new world, there are so many funding routes that you have options to. There are actually just too many. So it's really hard to know which one, because again, if there's lots of options and you pick the one that's not quite right, it might seem like it's making traction, but then there's like a blocker, right? And that's kind of that can often be the problem, is how do you intelligently grow while keeping that velocity, right? Yeah, correct. So that is actually the probably single most important thing for us right now, is to map what does that look like? Who are those partners? What is the timing of any of those events or relationships? So it's kind of like deal making, isn't it? Just finding the right way to deal make in this kind of game, and how do you basically get distribution channels in as many regions as possible, because you can almost have ambassador type sales channels that are regional, and then cut deals directly with
with those different.
Yeah, that's exactly right. And what are the right sales channels? So retail's hard.
Yes, B2C is hard. Right?
Yeah.
It's expensive, etc.
Exactly.
However, the feedback loop is nice.
That's right.
And you actually have less dependency.
Yeah, that's exactly right. But the other reason that retail is difficult is the terms of trade, right? So, 30 days to a distributor, and you're looking at 90 days. So, and you've got to fund next sort of stock.
Right.
So that's is retail the right channel? So
that would retail be through like a PB Tech?
Yeah. So
not direct to consumer. So retail's not direct to consumer. It's through a retail.
Yes.
Right.
So then that's actually, that kind of relationship is fantastic because you're dealing direct with the retailer.
Yeah, with one retailer.
That's right. But when you're thinking about scaling, and you're thinking about scaling in the US, Australia, whatever, that then very frequently involves distributors as well. So every time there's another person that's cutting into your margin.
Yeah, you always want to be as direct to source as possible, and that's something that we've actually really focused on in eccuity and in our kind of little ecosystem, is how do you get as direct to source on anything as you can, whether that being marketing capabilities, sales processes internally, finding your leads, getting your impressions.
Yeah, that's right.
Are you basically having to pay Facebook for all of your eyeballs or not? Becomes a big thing. So it's quite an exciting time because you do have so many options. With so many options come so many choices.
But actually, it's still infinitely better than how it used to be.
Right.
Because you didn't have options.
Yeah.
Previously, you just did not have options. So at least with options, that creates some competition. It creates some
that's right.
Motivation for the partners that we do choose to work with to be competitive.
And it's about collaboration with those partners. The whole kind of modern way of working, whether it be with your employees in your team or with your vendors, and your different, is there needs to be like a, not circular, but everyone, if you can make everyone patrons or equity partners in some fashion, and that doesn't necessarily mean that they have equity in the business, but like they're a real stakeholder.
Precisely.
And especially in something where, you're having, you can't boil the ocean on your own. You're going to need like a bunch of distributors and retailers and partners to essentially help you do that.
Yeah, exactly. And so we look at our partnerships in much the same way that we look at our internal talent. Just make sure that they're the right people and are really skilled, and that they are brought into our family. That they, as you say, that they feel that they are playing a part in this
success
in the outcome, and that the outcome is wildly successful.
Yeah, for sure. And that's so cool. And what would you say the biggest takeaway you've learned now, having done the consulting business, built IP within there, exited, and then picked up something new? Like, what is there one, how in life you have these kind of catalyst moments, these aha moments, these catalyst moments, they can be and they turn up all over the show in your life. Do you feel like you've had any kind of aha moments that are really I wish I kind of knew that when I was doing the consultancy business early?
So the consulting businesses were wildly successful, insane. We really did what is now done online, building communities and all of that. We were kind of early arrivals to that. Not actually doing that purposely, but just organically. That is who we were and how we grew, and they were wildly successful. And I guess what the difference for me is that I look at those businesses and I learn a lot about what actually really worked. And I think part of that was being really close to the customer. I always have this, that's how I'm built. I just absolutely want to understand who the customer is. So that was really nice. I was constantly close to the customer, so really understood that journey really well. The tech business, the sports tech business, was hard, really, really hard. And I look back at that now and definitely go, oh my God, if I knew what I know now, that would have been different. That would have been completely different. And all of those aha moments that I go, if I understood that then, that would have been different. They are fully embedded in this business. There is like zero negotiable. Like, these things are solid. And an example of that is that market validation piece. Understanding exactly the roadmap ahead of us. So that's very clear. That's been mapped out for a really long time.
And do you, And do you think that the next product it will be kind of these two products are just core? And that's what's that's going to be the next 5 years, kind of. Yeah.
So the idea is that we'll bring another SKU to market towards the end of next year,
and that would be the stress release thing.
Yeah, if we can get it working properly.
We
do have another product as well. We actually have 4 in the roadmap.
Yeah, right.
Depending on which ones we can, get to optimize, will be the ones that. But there is a customer journey priority as well. So that's why there's more than 4. The reason there are 4 is that we know that those 4 are, there are decent pain points for those 4. So, we'll bring other SKUs into the mix. We will potentially attach some software to at least one of those. And hopefully, if we've got good velocity and we've got follow-on SKUs, that will shape us nicely to have some conversations with some potential enterprise exit partners. It may not be enterprise, but that's kind of logically where we...
Sense.
Yeah.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much for coming on the pod. I really appreciate it. It's been fun. I've learned a lot, so thank you.
And I've learned that you have nasal congestion.
Yes, that is true.
You need a device.
True, I do.